This episode of International Teacher Podcast was recorded in May of 2021. Matt, the family guy, is out fishing now, so Greg, the single guy, that's me, I have a special treat for you. The most positive attitude of an international teacher I've ever met. He's been teaching overseas for over 20 years. He started out in the States, then he went to Honduras, China, Qatar, and most recently in Pakistan. This episode is Noah Spalding with a lot to share. Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best-kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you. All right, welcome to our show. This is Noah, a good friend of mine. How are you doing today, Noah?
Hey, I'm doing great, Greg. It's great to be here.
And where is here, Noah?
I am in Pakistan, finishing my fourth year at an international school.
Oh, great.
Really enjoying it, which tends to surprise people when I say that I enjoy living in Pakistan.
Noah, you and I have to say this, full disclosure, you and I were teaching at the same school the very first year in 2001, even though it was a different building or different little city. It was the same school system. In Honduras, remember that?
Oh, yeah. I had my share of baleadas, that's for sure, Greg. Huh?
That's right. I like the way you have that Virginia accent saying, I got the baleadas. I can't even talk like that. You haven't lost the accent yet, have you?
So nope, have not.
20 years overseas. So can you walk us through a little bit of your history of your teaching? And I know we don't talk about schools right now that we're at, but we can talk about the schools that we were at before. You've been overseas since 2001?
That's right. Well, basically, my story starts with, a lot of stories, and that's a woman. I met my future wife in Virginia, actually. She's Honduran, but I met her in Virginia. Our first date was on October 23rd of 2000, and by Christmas, we decided we were going to get married. So 2 months later, we decided we were going to get married. My parents probably I think they were scared to death, I guess. My wife was busy getting her green card. Like, she was working and the company was going to get her the green card. She was in the process of getting that. I convinced her that we should move to Honduras because she has a large family down there, and also I wanted to learn Spanish. And I'd say, well, let's just stay a year or two if there's any schools down there. And sure enough, I contacted an international school. Next thing I know, we did 8 years in Honduras. 3 years with the school the school system that you and I are associated with, Greg. But then I found a nice little mountain school on top of a mountain. El Machito is the name of the mountain. I'm not sure if you ever got up there, Greg. There was a brewery up there.
I don't remember. If there's a brewery, I must have been there. I'll have to ask Shannon and Brendan, see if they remember it. Wow, 8 years. So you spent 3 years at the international school like I did. And what were you teaching then?
Yeah, I was at the La Lima campus, and I was teaching 7th grade. So it was like social studies and language arts for 3 years. And then I went up to that. It's a mining school, mining company, and they own a school. And so I was a classroom teacher for 3 years. And then actually they said they wanted me to be trained to be a principal. And so I found a program through Lehigh. And I said, well, will you pay for me to go to this program in the summers? And they said, absolutely. So I went to Lehigh and got certified to be a principal. And then I spent 2 years as a principal at that school.
Do you have a Honduran wife? What's her name, by the way?
Dora the Explorer. So
Dora the Explorer.
That's right.
How did you talk Dora into leaving that big family and you guys left Honduras? Where'd you go next? You talked her into leaving.
We were on top of the mountain, 2 kids. We were going to stay 1 or 2 years. We ended up having 2 kids there. And I think, my wife she grew up living different places. She grew up, they lived in Costa Rica. She lived in the States for 2 years, but not like 1 year. And then she went back to Honduras and then she went back. So she's an explorer. She loves to see new things. And so she was ready to go. So so I found a school in the Middle East in Qatar, part of Qatar Foundation. And so we said, let's try it. And we spent 6 years there and met a lot of good friends there. After that, we went to China We went to a small little city in China with 6 million people. The name of the city I was in China, I always say it incorrectly. People that are Chinese, they always have no idea what I'm talking about because I say it incorrectly. But the city is Dongguan, but you have to Dongguan. It's near Guangzhou. So we spent 2 years there. We loved China, but the school was a private owned school that, just there was a lot of things that didn't feel right. And so from there, we now are finishing up our 4th year in Pakistan, and we love it.
All right. Before I get into some other things, let's talk a little bit about it because you're like me. You spend several years in every country. You fulfill the contract. Usually it's a 2-year contract for most of the better schools. And then you probably recruit somehow and find your new job. Can you tell me a little bit about the different ways that you've found new schools in the past?
Excellent. For me, and I think that's really where everyone sort of might be concerned, right? Because international teaching is one of these things that the recruiting season starts the fairs are in December and February and March or whatever, and usually you have to tell your school that you're leaving by they're asking earlier and earlier. So a lot of times you have to give up a job before you get a job, right? And so it's stressful. It is absolutely stressful. And so a lot of people will go to fairs. These huge fairs that happen in Bangkok or even in the States in Boston or San Francisco. I went to a fair to get the job in China. We went to Bangkok.
Was that the ISS fair or was that the search one?
We went to the ISS.
At the Shangri-La.
That's right. We were registered for both, and I said, "Don't worry, honey. If we don't get a job during the ISS, we'll just go to the search one." But those fairs are so emotionally taxing that we got one offer, and I said, "There's no way I can do another fair," and we took it. We took the job in China.
It's speed dating for a 2-year contract in another part of the world, right? It's crazy, but like you, I've gone to the different fairs, and I went to the Bangkok one in the Shangri-La Hotel. It was just amazing. I sat there for a week as a single teacher because that's really a fair for the couple teachers. People from all over the world go to that to get not just the Asian, but also some of the European schools. It's early in January for the ISS fairs. The only one before that, I think, is the ASA fair for South America and Central America down in Miami or Atlanta. And that usually happens in December, right? So like you said, I've gone to these different fairs. It's a mind-boggling time, and I'm going to do a whole section on just fairs. Did you always go to job fairs to get yours? Because sometimes as people have been overseas, it's word of mouth.
The best thing that happened to me was going to Lehigh to get that principal certification. And I met people. I had met people from all over the world there that were teaching in Saudi and China and Argentina and Indonesia. And, so that word of mouth really helped me not necessarily get the job in China, but it helped me get the job here in Pakistan because I was able to say in the interview, oh, I know people that have taught at your school and they really recommend. Oh, and they're like, who? And I was able to make those connections of naming people that I knew. And for me, I meet you once and you're a buddy of mine. So I always say, yeah, a buddy of mine worked at your school. And they say, who is it? And I'll mention the name. And luckily they had a good reputation. And so they probably contacted that person. And that's how and so we didn't have to go to a fair for this job, which I'm really feel very fortunate about. Well, some people really get into them, but for me, I guess because I have a whole family, it was stressful.
Right. I have so many things to respond to when you talk. I mean, you and I are on the same path here. You're like Matt, my co-host. He's married with 4 kids now, and it's not about job fairs. In fact, let's go back for a second. You said you signed up for 2 job fairs, and I know that people listening from ISS may not like this, but I do also sign up for 2 job fairs. I might sign up for the University of Northern Iowa. At the same time, I sign up for the other one. And I sign up because I want to do the networking and I want the database. And I pay the fee before the fair. Well, before the fair, I let the fair know if I'm not going to arrive. And that way I can make an educated choice of which one to go to based on the school that I'm really targeting. right? Because you
Right.
might have a list of schools that are going to UNI or going to Search. And in Bangkok, they do the same thing because Search started really following the ISS fairs and putting them on within the same week.
Right.
The admin from all of these schools go on like a circuit. So throughout the year, they'll start in December and then they'll go over to Bangkok maybe. They'll go to ECIS in Europe. They'll go up to, what's the one up in Canada? Queens. They'll do the Queens Fair and then they'll drop down and do UNI and then the ISS Fair on one of the coasts. It's very interesting that you did the same thing. I mean, like minds, we have great minds. We think alike. Sign up for 2 different fairs and then let them know and be crystal clear that you're not going to be at that fair even though you paid the full fee because it's an investment in your career, right?
Oh, absolutely.
As you got older, right? So now that you've been in the game for so long, you meet so many people that our paths are crossing over. Again, it's the 6 circles of Noah Spalding, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You just told me now, Noah, and I keep hogging the microphone, but you just told me a little bit about a guy named David, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that as international teachers, we have to keep in mind that world is so small. I mentioned to you that you were talking about someone you were interviewing, and I asked you where they were at now, and you said Ecuador. And it just so happens that a good friend of mine who was my principal in Qatar is the director of that same school in Ecuador. So you have to have that mindset of not burning any bridges, being a team player, enjoying the positives of where you're at. I could sit here and complain about China for the 2 years we were there, but there are a lot of good things that happened in China. Even if the school situation wasn't great, that my kids loved it. I rode my bike every day to school. I met a lot of good people, friends of mine that I consider really, buddies for life.
I was in an elevator in UNI. I'm sitting in this elevator talking about Cambodia, and this guy in back of me stops me on the way out of the elevator and says, "Hey, are you in Cambodia?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Say hello to David for me." And I was like, "David?" He's like, "Yeah, we worked in Pakistan a few years ago." So here I am in the middle of Iowa talking about Pakistan with a friend of mine that's in Cambodia. So, of course, I went back and said, "Deidre and David, I was with your friends from Pakistan." They said hello. And, of course, it's a small world, right? The Workmans are with me in the Middle East, and you know them. If you and I sat down for about 10 more minutes just talking about names, I think they would all crisscross. And if we did one of those mazes where you match up names of people that you know and got some software, I think we'd have so many connections. I mean, the personal learning network for people is just amazing overseas. Everyone you meet meets somebody else, right?
Absolutely. And I know teachers who sort of shy away from that. You really shouldn't. I mean, the connections and building connections and being open towards meeting people. And it's one of the real positives of the job. I was in a professional workshop in Northern Virginia. It was part of JOSTI, the U.S. State Department puts it on. And I met a lady that was in Curacao. I think she's the director's wife, and she's Colombian. And then all of a sudden, we got 2 new teachers at my school in Pakistan that had just come from that school. And so we immediately had things to talk about. And I was able to talk about knowing their old director's wife. And it was just really cool to build connections like that and constantly have that mentality of wanting to build those connections.
So you've been, so many places, right? So when you and your family want to go on vacation, where do you guys normally go?
Obviously, the last 2 years have not been nice as far as that goes. But when we first got here, I had really good friends in Germany. And so we went to Germany. Oh, I had the greatest time. Went to Czechoslovakia, went to, so we were doing Europe when we first got here. Because I remember Matt, your co-host, was talking about not seeing the U.S. and not being an international guy. I mean, I grew up in Virginia, and when I went to a foreign country, I went to Maryland. That's the foreign country I went to, was Maryland. For me, as a Southerner who had not seen the United States, I mean, I went to Honduras and Costa Rica, and then I went across the Middle East, and we've traveled all around Asia. And like I said, we've been up to Europe now. We went to Spain and France. And so it's just been great. And when COVID is done, we'll start traveling again. We've talked about going to Vietnam. We've talked about going to Portugal. So we'll see where the wind takes us.
If you go to Vietnam, I want you to be looking forward to a cup of coffee, because in Vietnam, I was there for a couple weeks. I was traveling through as I was living in Cambodia. I went to Vietnam in the south only, and I went out with a buddy of mine. Shout out to Mario. He's living back in the States now in California. You remember Mario Fiallos? He was working. He's Honduran. Yeah, he was with us in their cohort. Anyway, Mario was teaching. I think he was in Myanmar at the time. So he and I and his wife were traveling a little bit. And we went to, just Mario and I broke off, and we went over to Vietnam. And I want you to look forward to the cup of coffee, because they have this 8-ounce glass, which is what we serve beer in Wisconsin. And at the bottom is this very, very sweet condensed milk. And it's about an inch thick, right? But then what they do is they put this little filter on top of your own glass of coffee, and they pour the hot water over it, and it drips down in through the filter. You take it off. It was one of the most delicious things I've ever had. I love coffee, and that was really a unique way to have it. So look forward to that and go diving. I mean, there's lots of things you can do in Vietnam. There's lots of crazy motorbikes. I don't know what Pakistan is like. There's crazy motorbike things going on in Vietnam. And head over to Cambodia and see my former country of Cambodia, what that's like. I'll set you up with a tour guide and everything.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a deal. No, that you could do a whole show on traffic in different countries, because we've seen it all, haven't we? Oh my gosh.
Oh, good idea. Tell me about Pakistan now. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about Pakistan. I know nothing except I know that you probably learned a little bit about cricket. Tell me what life is like for you guys right now. Not right now with COVID, but I mean, tell me about pre-COVID Pakistan.
Well, when we got the job here, one of the things that my kids always wanted was a dog. And we lived in little apartments, and I said, we can't have a dog. When we live in a house, when we get a house, which, for me, I was telling them this, but I thought we'd never be in a house again. In Honduras, we were in houses, but I never thought we'd be in a house again. Well, then we got a job in Pakistan, and they gave us a house. And so sure enough, we got to get a dog. So we have Taco the Shih Tzu, who's is our dog. And yeah, the life's really nice here. The traffic is absolutely, it's not great. I think it was like our first week here, we got in an accident because they drive on the left side of the road. And when you are going to take a right turn, as somebody from the United States, you're in your left lane and you're going to take a right. So you put on your blinker and then you're staying in the left lane and then you take a right. Well, if you put on your right blinker and you're staying in the left lane, you're basically telling them to pass you to the right is what you're telling them. You're saying, okay, pass me to the right. So of course we're turning right and this car just comes immediately barreling past us and our mirrors just explode. And so, yeah, and we go to school and we're telling this story and they're like, yeah, you just told them to pass you on the right. And we're like, what? How does that mean pass to the right? What you're supposed to do is you're actually supposed to go into oncoming traffic if you're taking a right. Because if you go into oncoming traffic, that allows them to pass to the left. And so you're supposed to basically give them room to pass to the left, and you're supposed to just edge over and then be able to take the right. So we haven't gotten an accident since then, but yeah, it's and where we're at actually is not too bad. We've been in other cities in Pakistan, and it is just no rules. I mean, it reminds me of Honduras, Honduras with the driving over sidewalks and everything else.
How did you get your car set up? Did you do that when you were in your other country before you arrived? Did you wait?
Well, that's one of the nice things about my school as well is they provide us with a car. Yeah, they provide us with a car. We pay minimal, like a rental fee, but it's a car associated with the school, and they just rent them out to the foreign staff.
So once again, we're getting into that realm of gray area, like every school is different, right? And every school you've taught at has had a different package. And we talk about when you look at a school, you don't just look at the savings potential. in an interview, but you have to also look at, like, do they provide housing? Do they give you like a house like you have there? Do they provide it or give you a stipend, help you find one? Like in Cambodia, they made us look for our own. In Egypt, they made us look for our own. In Venezuela, they gave me a palace, a 3-bedroom with a pool on the Caribbean. And Honduras, we were in these little shacky. You had to have a roommate of all things, So every
Right.
school is different. Yeah, remember that. Every school is so different. But your school provided transportation, or at least rents it, and provides that because it's probably a hardship there. And the school has learned over the years, how do you keep your teachers? And that's one of the things they probably do with your onboarding. So that's a good question. I'm glad I asked you that because it is different at every school. I always have to have 3 things, and then you can match me on this. When I go overseas, I have to have the following. I have to have a maid, I have to have ice, and I have to have some way of travel. So I have to either have a bike or a car or something like that. Do you have anything that you need to have in your countries? I know you have family, so it's a little different for you.
That's an interesting, those 3 things, because, in China, obviously, we didn't have a maid because, in Honduras, in Qatar, and here we have housekeepers and we have a chef. We actually have a chef here. In China, we didn't have a lot of those things. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a requirement just because of the fact that we did China was not an issue. And ice, that's interesting. Ice, you have to have ice, huh? If I would say 3 things I have to have, it would be I would need to have that travel allowance to just fly back to see our families every summer. Would have to have that. It obviously would have to have tuition for our kids, right? My kids, if I'm looking, I have to have them pay for tuition for my kids because that's going to be a major cost. And then another thing that's been really nice now, which is something that I didn't think about, was when we worked in China, they only gave us local health insurance. And so when we traveled to the States, we had to pay additional costs. And so now that we're here in Pakistan, we have worldwide health insurance that we don't pay for. So
Yeah,
I would say that those 3 things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we haven't talked about health insurance and life insurance and other kinds of insurance and money. Those are episodes coming up because those are every school's different too. It's very vital, whether you're single like I am or whether you have family and kids, that you have health insurance. And those are usually arranged for by the school, but it also differs on what kind of insurance. No, I remember living in Venezuela. A friend of mine had just flown in and she got some kind of I don't know if she had a viral thing, or I think it turned out to be like kidney stones. So one day she was just so horribly sick. I had to take her to a clinic. And I walked in there. Luckily, I spoke Spanish. She didn't speak any Spanish at the time. And I was just helping her out, like onboarding her into the country in the first couple of weeks. I took her into the clinic and they said, "Did you bring the medication?" And I said, "What?" I didn't know what they're talking about. It turned out that we had to provide all of the things that she needed. So the doctor gives me a list of things. I go around the corner, go to the pharmacy and buy these things for her, including an IV bag, including a needle, including the medication, right? So I bring it back. She said, "No, you need to have 2 vials of this, to have 2 sets of the medication for the IV. She'll be here for a long enough time." And I said, "Okay." But before I go back there, I said, "How many times is she going to have to come back?" And the nurse goes, "Oh, about a week." So I go back to the pharmacy with just this little handwritten note. And then, this is this country of Venezuela at the time. I went back with this handwritten note for the pharmacy from the doctor and the nurse. And it basically said, how much to give her for that one day. I looked at the pharmacy lady and I said, "Can I have 2 weeks worth of medication?" She says, "Ooh, expensive." And I said, "That's okay. I'll pay. She gives me a box full of IVs, a box full of this, a box full of that. And I took it over and I kept it in my car, took the rest in for her to have for that day, and then said, here's the rest of it. Take some of this every day." That wasn't even a health insurance thing. That was that was just covered because it was very little money to pay. It wasn't some surgery or something that she was paying for. But I was worried what would happen if we had to pay for some kind of insurance and major doctor stuff for her. Because it depends on your school, right?
Absolutely. I actually had to have ACL surgery when I was in Qatar. I've been avoiding it for the longest time, and I had another accident and actually had to I went in to a sports hospital. They have actually a sports hospital there, and my doctor he had previously worked for the Belgian national football team. Okay, he spoke French, he spoke German, he spoke Spanish, he spoke English. He looked like out of a magazine. He looked like just like one of those doctors that's on TV. And so he says, "Oh, we have to replace your ACL," and it cost. I think it cost maybe $13,000, and my insurance paid for every cent. Just without a question.
No copay or anything. Just a straight up. They took it over.
Yeah. Where we work for Cutter Foundation, which is a really highly reputable company in the world, and it was just completely paid for. It was so nice, and all the rehab and everything else was amazing.
Well, I tell you, we could, like you said, we have so many stories. I could tell you a ton of stories about, operations. And I think that my school currently would even give me LASIK surgery or something if I need it, just for my reading glasses. These are not for my sight. It's just for reading, but I could actually have that corrected. I don't know where that ends, Really, if you're listening to this, Noah and I have completely different stories for every single school that we've worked at. There's a different insurance package, a different housing package. It's all going to be different. And that's all part of your interviewing process, right? So tell me more about Pakistan. What do you, I want to know more.
Yeah, it's interview, but it's also research, right? There's a lot of places you can do a lot of research about schools. There's Facebook groups. There's going to conferences, just finding out about what really the schools have to offer and the good schools. Like for us, I had known about this school that we're in Pakistan for a very long time. And I just kept on, would look every single year about what was opening, what was not, what trends they had. And they just don't have a lot of turnover. And so when we did apply, I was just really excited to get an interview. And then when we got the offers, I was just so elated because I knew that this was, and the fact that I was able to talk about it with the director, I think that was important, that they knew that I had been looking at this school for quite a long time. And I ride my bike to school every day. I commute by bike. Living situation, people think Pakistan is dangerous. It is not dangerous. That was one of the things that made us attractive. Is we'd been in Latin America, we've been in Honduras, and when they knew I was in Honduras, they were like, "Oh my goodness, you know about real security issues." Pakistan is not, we were not in danger. It's a lot of political stuff, and occasionally things will get heated, and then we'll have to go on virtual school or whatever. But it is just a really nice place to be. The weather's really, it's getting hot now, obviously, because it's getting to be summer. But we really enjoy the people here. Are super nice. Oh my goodness, the people are super nice. The people that work for us are really, really nice. The professional community we're part of, we really enjoy working. So yeah, it's just a matter of doing your research, figuring out where the good schools are, being persistent, seeing what kind of hiring trends are happening. Nowadays, I think hopefully things will start getting brighter as the world starts being able to handle this situation.
I'll put a plug in for a couple more things. I'm sure you're aware of TIE Online. I've been with TIE Online as a subscription since I think 2000. When I first came across it, somebody told me at a job fair that, of course, I should be on there. There's these job fairs like ISS, and there's ISS Shirley. There's search to get into. They can go to the UNI website and look up the job fair for international educators, overseas educators, and help me out if there's more. I think there's also Joy Jobs is still around. There's about 5 or 6 new online companies that have come around as headhunters.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is that don't listen to what other people always say about the country that you're looking at. Did you talk to somebody that was teaching currently at the school about safety?
No, what it was it was actually a Facebook group. It was a Facebook group, and when the job came open here, I contacted that person, and I had several conversations with people that had previously worked here. They gave me the heads up to say, yeah, this is actually a great situation. You're not in danger, And I think that's why when I talk to people and that at these fairs sometimes, and they say, oh well, I only want Europe. I'm only going to settle for these countries. I think you're just limiting yourself. You really we've always gone into every single job fair and just been open to talking to any school that wants to talk to us, just because we can learn something and find out there's a lot of hidden gems out there that you might not be aware of. So when we go into a job fair and a friend of mine says, well, where do you want to work? And we're like, somewhere will give us a job. I'm just open to, at the time, I was open to whatever. And now that I'm getting older and my kids are moving over to the States because my daughter's a junior in high school, we'll probably start looking more towards being in Latin America again, because we won't need to be in Asia anymore. We can be on that same time zone and be closer to my kids.
That's exactly why I moved from Cambodia. I went from Cambodia over to South America. My mom was ragging on me for being over in Cambodia, which is a 12-hour difference. So at 7 o'clock in the morning, she's waking up. Well, not my mom. My dad might be awake already at 7 o'clock in the morning. It was 7 o'clock at night for me there. Now it's a little bit more like Europe where I live, and where you live, it's a little bit more like Europe. It's an 8 or 10-hour difference, but that 12 or 14-hour difference makes a huge dent in your communication and the amount of American football you can see. You and I both lived in Honduras, and at the time, it was a very dangerous city. San Pedro Sula was ranked really high. We have lots of stories of things that happened down there, even with colleagues of ours or personally, and we knew that it was going to be dangerous. But I tell you what, once you go down there and live, and you get wrapped into your school, the best schools sort of wrap around you, and it's your security blanket. They take care of you. They get you through the law stuff. If you get in an accident, they help you out with their lawyers. If these big schools really take care of their own, right, Noah?
Yeah.
If you go and live in a country that everybody says, don't go there, it's dangerous, right? Well, you're going to miss out because, like you said, the gems are out there. Honduras was a gem for me. I loved it. I will go back someday. I think overall, and I think you'll agree with me, but every educator overseas that is seasoned has said to me and give the same advice. Don't go past those little itty-bitty countries and schools that you don't know about, because the best time I ever had was at so-and-so school that I didn't even know existed on the map. And they tell you that they spent this much time here and it was the best experience they ever had. Looking back after 20 years, and it's just a normal conversation I have with other overseas educators that are seasoned, right? Those gem schools, like you're saying, how do you know what it's like? Well, you just sign up for it and interview with them. Research, ask people online, find a friendship group that knows about teaching there. So I totally agree with that. You and I think very much alike on a lot of these topics.
And we've always, my wife and I, we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it too, like when teachers, for whatever reason, and they decide they're going to move on, or if the school decides they don't want to rehire them, they spend that last year just mad about everything. And my wife and I have always said, you know what, when it's our time to leave, one, we want to be happy about being there. Like we never have left anywhere after staying too long. And the other thing we do is we just start just being grateful for everything about where we're at. So even in China, we had 2 years there. I was the athletic director. So that was one of the reasons why the job was just so too much for me, because I have a lot of respect for athletic directors out there. I mean, they're at the school all hours of the night. And so for me, I knew I didn't want to do that job anymore. But I spent that whole last year throwing myself in it, but just being grateful for the opportunity to learn that I didn't really want to continue to do that. But at the same time, just being very thankful for the opportunity that I had. Everywhere we've been, people ask me, oh, what's your favorite place? Well, you know what? Every single place that we've been at has been at the right timing for us. Honduras and meeting my wife's family for that long and learning Spanish was absolutely fantastic. El Machito on the top of a mountain, which is great. Qatar for 6 years. Middle East. I love the Middle East. I would go back to the Middle East. China for 2 years. And now Pakistan. We've really just been very fortunate every place we've been.
Do you have any schools that are on your list like you've been watching? You said you were watching Pakistan. For me, it's the Anglo-American school in Moscow.
Okay.
The Singapore American School, SAS, in Singapore, I think would be a great school to work at. I know several people have been in and out of both of those schools. You know, the International School of Japan is amazing, and there's some in Hong Kong which I don't even know about, which may not be the best time right now to go to Hong Kong, but back at you. Do you have any schools that stick out?
Let me just comment on a few of those. So I believe that school in Moscow, you and I both know someone there, right? From our days in Honduras. Is he still there?
Who are we talking about?
And didn't Paul Moody go there?
Oh my God, that's right. I forgot that the connection with Mooney, because I moved to Egypt and went and taught in Egypt with Mooney, and Mooney was my roommate. There, yeah, he's still there. Yes,
okay,
he's still there.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, you're right. And I know a couple other people there, but what else?
And also the school in Singapore. I have a buddy of mine here. His brother teaches at that school. And that is an amazing school, the American. We actually got an interview. I actually was thrilled that my wife and I got an interview at that school before we came here. So I chalked that up to a win when I got the interview.
Absolutely.
The schools, Greg, for me, I'm always looking, because we're looking to go back on the, closer to the same time zone of my kids when they go to college. I'm looking at that school, the International School of Panama, in Panama City, also maybe a school in Costa Rica, my friend's school in Ecuador, possibly. We're planning on being here until my son graduates, and then we want to go back to where we're on the same time zone as them. Not in the States, because for a long time my mom was like, "When are you moving back here? When are you moving back here?" And we always say, "Well, Mike, our contract's up in 2 years. Our contract's up in 1 year," but we knew we were never going back.
It's like saying free beer tomorrow, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, you sound like a kindred spirit. I can't imagine going back to the States after finding out about this secret. And I think that you can look forward to the fact that if you're in a bad situation, if it's not too bad, you're only in it for 2 years by contract. And then you renew. And that's something that we look forward to, because I was in a really bad situation in Egypt, and I even broke a contract, and that's in my history. And I had to make up for that and get through that to find future schools. But I didn't hide anything. I was transparent with all of it. I think that you bring out the most positive. I think you're the most positive person I've taught with overseas and talked with recently in so long about teaching, and the overseas education. You're a very positive person. I have one reflection after you talked about leaving a school or finding out that you have a new contract, and that people are really crabby and they're like, "I have to get out of here. I can't wait to get to my next school." I have this thing where every time I find out, which is through job fairs, that's my way of doing it. I still go back for job fairs because it's networking, it's fun, I can help newbies. But I guess here's my point, is that when I find out in January that I have a new contract for my next school, I put 120% into my final 6 months at the school I'm at, knowing that I have security of my new job coming up, but I don't want to burn any bridges. In fact, I want to go out with a blaze of glory, right? It's very similar to what you were saying. You want to be positive and end on a good note, because it's not just because it's a small world. I mean, that could come back to burn you too, right? If you do something wrong in your school currently because you have a job coming up already, you have a bird in the hand already. If you do something wrong and leave that school in a negative fashion, those people are going to show up on your radar later, whether or not you like them, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Noah, I forgot to mention this. There was another teacher, I'm not going to mention this guy's name, okay, but he was one of the scariest people I ever met, and he was teaching music at our campus, and he came in with us. Do you remember the old cane guy hobbling around the first year?
No, I don't.
Okay. It doesn't matter. The scariest guy I've ever taught with, okay? He ended up getting a job somewhere else. It was just a few years back. Mario was teaching in Thailand. And I went to visit him at his school. He goes, "Greg, wait here for a second in his office." He goes, "I have someone you want to see." Lo and behold, there's this guy walking in, and he's that scary fella from my first year teaching ever. Scary for the students, scary for the staff. And then Mario goes, yeah, and I think you know somebody else here. And this guy walks in to fix the printer, and I had already been working on it while I was waiting in the office. They had like a snag on the printer, and I'm working on it. And in walks this guy from Egypt that was the technology guy in Egypt when I worked there. So in this little office, there's Mario, the scary guy, and then this other guy I taught with in Egypt. I'm like, this is weird. The stars are aligning. Oh my God, what's going on here, right?
Yeah.
I was expecting Juta Patterson to walk in or something, because she knew the whole world too, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. My job in China, I knew that I wanted to leave. Like, I knew that we would only do 2 years and out. I knew I think it was like the third week I was there, I was like, I cannot do this. And the reason why is because they love sports, the international schools in China. I mean, they love sports. So I was basically at a new school, and I was the athletic director. So I was expected just to go to every single sporting event. And so in China, obviously the traffic's horrible. So we would be coming back on a bus at 10 o'clock at night. And this is twice during the week. So here I am coming back on a bus at 10 o'clock at night. And it was the second time, and I'd been at school all week until 5, until practice was over. And I was like, I can't do this. And so what you were saying is, so when I came in, there was nothing. There was no, like, I had no contacts to find fields. I had no contacts for not transportation, but no contacts for referees. I had no contacts for equipment. So the previous athletic director didn't leave me any of this. And so when I got my job, I spent that whole last year from January until June creating a handbook, an athletic director handbook, to give to the guy that replaced me, that had contacts for jerseys, so here's some fields you can use, and so at least they had something to start with, right? And this was after I had already had the job here, but I just wanted to give that next person something that I never had,
Yeah, traditionally you want to leave them with something. And that's not always going to happen to international schools. When you teach in the States for 10, 15, 20 years or longer, and you have curriculum that's passed on through the school, and there's good and bad about that. Number one, I never wanted to teach a curriculum that was like fed to me. I had to. But on the other hand, if you don't have anything and you're creating everything new because the teacher that left before you took all the curriculum stuff or didn't even follow it, right? Or they regenerate. It's like so much work to restart everything. So, kudos on you. Good on you, mate, as the Australians would say. You left that job, spending the last couple of months making sure that you had a legacy to hand over to the next guy if you wanted or didn't want, the next guy or woman, that they had something to start with, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I even said that at the beginning. I said, listen, these are the people that I use for whatever reason. If you find something else or find something better, by all means, I'm just giving you something to work from. That way they had at least something they could, if something they found better or if something changed, they could obviously do that. But it was just something they could start with, because I had nothing. It was a position that was way over my head. And really, like I said, I have a lot of respect for athletic directors, and I met a lot of good friends because I was in desperate need. I have a really good buddy of mine who's an athletic director in Shenzhen. Another one who left and now is like a boarding director in Korea. Another one in American School of Guangzhou. So you meet. That's the thing. You meet a lot of good friends that can really help you out. In those kinds of situations. That's for sure.
Well, I tell you what. If I was an athletic director, I think I'd want to follow you in a job because you definitely worry about the person that's coming after you. And make sure that they have something else to work with. I love that because it doesn't always happen at schools. Of course, we have to go back to that. It's a gray area. It's depending on the school and the positions. You follow some people that were just golden and leave you all of their stuff. Some people just leave you a mess, and it depends on your situation. So there's so many stories about people leaving in disgust or people thriving and staying there for years. One of my first questions for a school overseas is, what is your average teacher stay? Like, what's the average length of time a teacher stays at your school? It's not always the best answer because it could vary, because you maybe have these outliers that stay 20 years, right, at a school, and then you have the ones that stay for 1. But at some point, it's going to even out, and you can get a feel for that kind of a school. If they're staying for 4 years, I think that's perfect. If it's 4 or 5, that's a high average, because otherwise they might have just every year. They have, there's some schools that they hire and people leave every single year. I mean, you don't want that necessarily.
Yeah. And the history of the school, because I will tell you, when the school in China had only been around for 4 years, and those startup schools tend to, it's just a lot of work because a lot of stuff hasn't been established. So I think that understanding how long the school's been around, what kind of reputation it has, what kind of legacy it has, I think that's a good thing to try to figure out, try to find out.
I guess I was going to say, any more advice you have for upcoming teachers or people getting into the field, but we've been giving advice all along. Is there...
Greg, I feel like we have figured out like a hack. We have figured out a hack of life because we have a profession that there's no way you could look back on this profession after working with kids and say, oh, I regret doing that. Well, I love my job. My job for the last 20 years working with kids is something I have truly been just amazed at. And so to do it in an international setting where you don't have housing costs, because a lot of times they pay for your rent, right? But there are certain, you have to figure that out, but they actually will contribute. So you have so much more disposable income. And to be able to do that, I tell my daughter, who's a junior in high school, I said, you're going to go to college. You can pursue your dreams all you want, but at least get certified to teach something is what I tell her, just as a backup, just to have that, because I know I have buddies of mine that were lawyers and actually quit being a lawyer to go back and be international teachers.
You did.
I mean, that just
lawyers.
Yeah, I have two friends of mine were lawyers in the United States, and they went back to become international teachers. One grew up as an international student. His parents were international teachers, so he already knew about it. And then another one, his wife sort of got him to go, But I mean, it's amazing. I think we have really found something that a lot of people, if they would just try it, they would be as lucky and as fortunate as we are.
Well, I tell you what, though, I have a word of caution with that. It's not just travel. First and foremost, you talk about it too. It's a career in teaching. And we have to we're certified. You and I both went through the certification and training. You taught in the States for 6 years before you even went overseas. So we are teachers first and foremost. You're a dad, number 2. And then number 3, we're travelers, right? I think that's a really good point I've always put forward in any kind of literature, any kind of talk that I've had with people and advice. I've always said to them, it's a teaching career. And first and foremost, the certification is so important. And that's why you have to have one to get to a job fair, right?
Oh, yeah. And if you don't like teaching, you shouldn't be doing this job.
Oh, my God. It'll be even worse if you try teaching overseas. Oh, my God. Yeah. I can't even imagine that. Wow.
That would be a night. Yeah. That would be a nightmare.
Can you think of one thing that happened in class that you could share that would never, ever happen in the States?
Well, I'm not sure I could beat your Nueve Anos talk that you...
Yeah, that's right.
That one was special, I'll tell you that. I tell you what, my first day at the school in Qatar, right? So I worked at a school that was part of Qatar Foundation, but it was a special school that basically all the kids that were having trouble learning, for whatever reason, they were sent to my school. So it had a sort of rough reputation. My first day, I had a girl in there. She was in the royal family, right? And she was telling me, I smacked the last teacher. And she's telling me this first day. I smacked the last teacher. And I was like, oh, really? She's like, yeah, I smacked her. And then I got her fired. So she's telling me this the very first day. So I went home and I think I cried. I was like, what have I gotten ourselves into,
Real men cry. Real teachers cry. That's good. How old was this girl?
No, middle school. She was probably like in 7th grade. seventh or eighth grade, and I tell you, for the first month, I was scared. My strength as a teacher is making connections with my kids, and so eventually she figured out that I was not, I was there to really help her, and she turned into one of my favorite students of all time. Just a super, super nice lady. I have a lot of respect for her and the growth that she made. But that first day, she was telling me about smacking some teacher around. Oh my gosh.
I got to bounce right off of that with another one of my own. This one's in Cambodia at ISPP, and we had students from all over the world. The Royal Cambodian family was rather large, lots of different kids coming to our school. I was doing after-school soccer, and it went from like 12 kids to about 40 kids a week. So I had them Mondays and Fridays, and right before soccer, I'd have to do bus duty or something, right? Every school has duties. And I'd make sure that the kids get on the bus or get in with their driver if they had a driver. So I was doing this on the back end of the school where some of the drivers would pull up and get the kids. The rather rich ones had their own personal limos and drivers coming in and bodyguards. And it was very funny because one kid was sitting there, and I can't remember his name, but he was one of my favorite students, and we always joked around because we had a good relationship. Just like you said, I had a good relationship with a lot of the kids. And this little guy, I'm like, get out of here. And I sort of like, with my foot, I sort of like make like soccer kick him into the, his butt into the car.
Yeah.
Because he's like, yeah, see you, mister. Try that again, This other teacher comes up to me. She goes, oh my God, Greg, do you know who you just kicked? And I'm like, what? He's in my class. I love that guy. This look of fright on her. She's like, oh my God, Greg, you just kicked one of the king's grandsons. I'm like, what? What? I mean, first of all, I didn't really kick him. Number two, we were playing, and he always does it to me. He would sneak up behind me in the hallways, and he'd like kick me in the butt because he's one of my soccer players, right? But holy cow, I didn't know he was. I don't care if people come from royalty or they come from the gutter. I don't care. I treat a lot of the kids. I try to treat them all the same. I'm sure you're the same kind of person. As a teacher, you want to reach out and treat them who they are, not where they come from. And that's so important to me.
And people always ask me what are the differences between kids and where you've been? And I tell them, man, I'm like, kids are kids. There's certain little cultural differences, but kids, there's so many more similarities between us as people than differences. And it just breaks my heart to see the world pitted against each other, because Chinese kids, man, they're great. I work with kids in the States. I had a lot of good relationships. I work with kids in China. They're kids. They care about, they like playing basketball, and they know who Michael Jordan is. And, it's just, I just wish that we all could to feel that kind of humanity.
The parents are the ones that care about our differences. I remember in Switzerland, I had a class of 14 kids. Okay. It was a spectacular time. Great teaching. I liked it a lot. But that specific year, the first week of school, it was just a few years back, right when Ukraine and Russia were starting to have problems politically. One of my parents walked in and he says, I am Russian. I want you to take care of my little girl. She is in here, and her friend is from Ukraine. I want you to know this. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And the father was being just like informative, right? Because the two parents didn't get along. But the one father just wanted me to know that their two daughters were friends in my classroom of 14. I have a Ukrainian and a Russian at the time of the explosion going on over there when it first began. And the other father didn't mention that to me, but he was a little bit upset that his daughter was friends with a Russian. And it was so fascinating. The girls didn't care. The girls were best friends. And I just loved having them in my classroom. I think you always talk about what's the difference in classrooms. If you taught in the States, you might, depending on where you teach in the States, you're going to have kids of different colors and different ethnic origins and different languages if you're in New York. But if you're in Kansas, maybe not. Maybe you have some stragglers. There's some one-offs. There's some ESL kids. we're going to have refugees, but not like we have overseas. In our schools, depending on if you're at a host national school or if you're in an international school, I don't know about you, but I have at least 50 to 70 different countries represented by passport, by color, by language, by mother tongue, all at our school right now. It's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, I've met kids from, I tell them every single time, oh, you're the first, what was it recently? Oh, you're the first kid I've ever taught from Malaysia. Oh, you're the first kid I've taught from Norway. So it's really incredible the variety that you find.
I had a kid named Fook. He was from China. His name was Fook, and it was F-U-K. And it was in Cambodia, but it was very strange for me, and I just had to giggle as a human being, as a lover of language. I just had to giggle every time I said his name.
Right. Oh yeah. We had kids in China named Sunny and Rain. They would choose these English names, and it was just, you really sure about that Rain? But yeah, they liked Rain and Sunny, and
nobody named Crockpot or anything like that, were there?
No.
Imagine if their parents weren't really on the game and they picked something like Crockpot. Be like, really? Are you sure you want that name? They make one of our names too, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I've enjoyed the last 20 years, and I would imagine I'll probably be teaching internationally for at least 11 more until I'm 60. And then we'll find out. Maybe I'll drive around the United States in a van. I'm not sure.
You just hit what I'm doing for my 60th. I already committed to that. I'm going to travel around the States in a camper with one of my buddies from back home and celebrate our 60th. Yeah.
I hope you come to a NISA conference, my man. That's where I usually see some groups, some people that you might know is at NISA conferences. So
yeah, those regional conferences that happen that some schools send their people to.
Right.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to happen soon, I'm sure. But Noah, thank you so much for being on my show. I really appreciate it. If people want to reach out to you, do they just find you on Facebook?
Yeah, they can reach out to me through Facebook or my email. It's noahbball23@gmail.com. A lot of times people will see me on International Schools Review, and they'll ask me questions through that, and I'll certainly answer every question and help people out, because I feel like people have helped me along the way. So I'm definitely available to help people out if they have any questions.
But thank you very much, Noah. I appreciate it. From Pakistan, it's Noah. Thank you.
All right, Greg. Thanks a lot. I appreciate having me on.
That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah.